Top of the morning to everyone out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And we cover Notre Dame football. And guess what? It's the beat that never sleeps. And there's obviously more news. Literally for you.
But like how many times have I texted you at 11 o'clock at night and you're like, so I don't even want to hear about that.
No, you never sleep. The beat never sleeps. I tend to get beat to sleep. But Notre Dame has picked up a grad transfer, and it's a kicker. Didn't see this one coming, Brian.
Yeah, the news of the day. We're all the stuff going on. We're going to start off with the news of a kicker. Notre Dame landed Blake Grupe. That is his name. His last name is literally Grupe. I asked him last night. It was actually kind of cool. I got a heads up that he was going to announce today, and so I called him yesterday, and he was on campus at Notre Dame because he's starting the spring semester.
That's awesome.
And he said, hey, yeah, let's talk. So we got quotes from him, and then once he went public with his commitment, we released a story. Got to tell you, Vince, very interesting kid, very confident kid, but in the kind of confidence you like.
Absolutely.
Talked in the interview with me, talked about, he said, I loved it. He said, I went in the portal Sunday night. Notre Dame contacted me Monday. People asked me what other schools I was looking at, and he said it didn't matter. There's no need to talk about any other schools.
I love
Once
that.
Notre Dame reached out, it was done.
I love
and
that.
I asked him, I said, look, there's a lot of – I said, look, not that the kicks at Arkansas State weren't important. They were big kicks at Arkansas State.
Sure.
This is Notre Dame. Like, the magnitude is – and he's like, the way he responds, like, that's what he wants. He's like, I want those kind of kicks. Like, that's why I'm coming to Notre Dame, is I want those pressure. And this is like a 5'8", 155-pound kid, right? Like, he is not big. Was a team captain at Arkansas State, which I found interesting. He'll be a sixth-year senior.
Right.
He already has a master's degree. This is an opportunity.
Oh, wow.
This is about wanting to kick at Notre Dame and be on that stage. This isn't about master's degrees or anything like that. This is about Notre Dame, and it was really interesting. I mean, I even tried to get him to tell me what other schools he looked at, and it was like, heard from Notre Dame. Once I saw that on my phone, there was nobody else. So success-wise, this is a kid that tied a Sun Belt, set a school record with 354 points in his career. He was a 4-year kicker at Arkansas State. Started as a walk-on, went on scholarship. He will be on scholarship at Notre Dame. He was their place kicker for 4 years. Not a super strong leg, but pretty accurate. The COVID year for him was down, but he was over 80% in 2019, and he was over 80% this year, which is over 80% in field goals is pretty good. He was, I think, 15 of 23 on kicks 40 and longer the last 3 years. And so this is a kid that's got success. He's tied a Sun Belt record in field goals made during his career with 64. So, good kicker, good steady kicker, good athlete. This was a good pickup for Notre Dame. And so talking to him last night, also, here's the interesting thing. He's not really a kickoff guy. He kicked off, I think, in 2020, and he only had like 14 kickoffs. My understanding talking to him is that he's coming to Notre Dame to be the place kicker. Not if they need him to kick off, he said he would do it, but it sounds like it could be a situation where Bryce McPherson, the freshman punter, and Josh Bryan, the current freshman kicker, could battle for the kickoff duty, and Blake will be the place kicker. Now, The other thing he said was, I was not promised anything. I'm going to have to compete and battle for the job. He knows he's going to have to beat out Josh Bryan. So this is not a situation where it's like, okay, Josh, another year sitting on the bench. He understands that this isn't a guaranteed job. You got to get the job done. Now, of course, Notre Dame's not bringing in a sixth-year kicker to sit on the bench all year either, right?
Sure.
He's, if we're being honest, he's going to have to win the job. But he seemed to embrace that.
Yeah.
He talked about Michael Vincent and how great Michael Vincent was. Like, you can tell he's already kind of studied the operation. Michael Vincent obviously being the short snapper on PAT and field goals. And so really sharp kid, really confident kid from Missouri. I was impressed by him. And I usually don't enjoy talking to kickers, to be completely honest with you. But I enjoyed talking to this kid. He had some swagger to him. He had some swagger to him.
Let me ask you a question. From a Notre Dame standpoint, do you think that they were in the market for a kicker? Like it's something that they were actively looking for? Or is this just a, hey, this kid's really, really good. Let's bring him in because our kicker's a freshman. And, you know, I mean, he's going to be a redshirt freshman, right?
I don't even think it was as much about that as it was just that guy's pretty good.
Yeah.
And again, he's mainly just a place kicker. He's not, because there's 3 kicking duties in football, right? There's PAT field goals, there's punting, and then there's kickoffs.
Right.
And the same guy that does PAT field goals doesn't always do kickoffs. Now he may do kickoffs, but I think that's going to be a battle. So to me, my understanding is I had heard nothing about them wanting to find a kicker until this kid jumps in a portal. He jumps in Sunday night. They're on a Monday morning.
Okay.
So I don't think that they were necessarily like eyes closed to a kicker, but I don't think it was something that
a priority.
Yes.
Yeah,
if a guy presented itself, and here's something else it tells me. It tells me that they don't view this year as a rebuilding year.
Good point.
You're not bringing in a 6-year kicker if this is a rebuilding year. You're going to take your lumps with Josh Bryan as a rookie and get him ready for 2023. Again, it's another sign that, to me, this coaching staff is not looking at 2022 as being they don't fight as hard to get Foskey back and Adamiola back and Patterson back. I was told, and I'm still trying to get the details of this, I was told that a group of Notre Dame coaches flew out to California to meet with Jarrett Patterson face-to-face in an attempt to convince him to come back.
Interesting.
And I'm still trying to get the details on that. So, that is, okay, y'all are serious about this thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it feels good to be wanted.
Because if this is a rebuilding year, you almost kind of want to let Jarrett Patterson walk. You almost kind of want Foskey to –
so that you can work on other guys.
Yeah.
I mean, give them the experience.
Get ready for 2023. And then you have even more of an excuse to say, hey, we lost some guys. And,
Yeah, you're never going to hear that
but
out of Mark.
They're fighting hard to get those guys back.
Right.
And to then take a 6-year kicker, what it tells me is, okay, it's a group of coaches that look at this as they're fired up. Vince, I just realized something new on StreamYard. I'm sorry I got to interrupt you. I'm super fired up about this because you need to know this.
Yeah.
We can now star comments.
What?
And they go in if you hover over a comment.
I see a star there.
If you star that and then you look over in the starred section. So if we're going through the show and there's things you want to bring up, let's start clicking on those. Again. Y'all are right here. It's like we're having a staff meeting with all 550 of y'all right here. This is amazing. But I just saw that. So maybe
that's awesome. I never knew that either.
It's got to be new because I remember hovering over things a couple days ago and not seeing that. So
one thing I want to clarify, because somebody did ask it and I didn't star it. The scholarships for kickers is going to be the exact same as it was last year, because you've got a 1-for-1.
It's going to be 5. Yeah.
You got a 1-for-1 at punter, right? And then you've got a 1-for-1 at kicker.
Right.
So
plus you also had Josh, because you had 2 kickers on scholarship last year. You had a punter and you had 2 snappers.
Right.
So that number will stay the same.
Exactly the same. So it's not you're not losing or gaining. Yeah.
It puts them by my count at 87 right now, which is if you're within 4 or 5 of 85 before spring ball starts, you're fine.
Because there's going to be movement after spring. Right. I mean, there just always is.
So there's still room to land a couple kids, and there's still going to be room to work. Because here's the thing: just because guys are being brought back now doesn't necessarily mean they're going to stay. For example, let's just say one of the 5th-year safeties is now behind Brandon Joseph. He's behind Ramon Henderson. He's behind Xavier Watts, and he's behind the other 5th year. It's not a guarantee he decides to hang on, or someone else at a position like that may. So there will be some departures. There will be some guys, a guy or two maybe that it considers going on a medical scholarship. So there's room to get not only down to 85, but to still add. And that's the key. There's still room to add. But I don't think people came here, Vince, today to talk about the kicker. We wanted to talk about that at the beginning, and then there's some other things that I'm sure people want to talk about today.
So Notre Dame, it took a hard left-hand turn in the past 24 to 36 hours, I would say, when it comes to you
always take right-hand turns here, Vince.
Oh. Well, all right, if you say so. I have a NASCAR history. It's a left-hand turn for me, all right? But anyway,
it's not even really a turn. It's a circle. You're leaning into a direction. It's not really a turn.
whatever.
Yeah.
But
It's more of a merge, more of a merging.
Just got your blinker on as we merge over. Um,
Sorry.
So Notre Dame, we thought we knew where
Yeah.
the wide receiver coaching position was going. Then all of a sudden we didn't know, and now we know again.
Yeah.
And a very interesting turn of events, I would
Yes.
say. So you want to walk us through kind of how everything went down and where we are right now?
Yeah. So a lot of this is going to be stuff people on the message board know. And basically at the very beginning, Marcus Freeman made a phone call to Brian Hartline, his former teammate and friend. That wasn't going to go anywhere. And from then on, Notre Dame kind of identified really two guys. And that's where all the conversation was in leading up to this week, talking to sources. I mean, on the Notre Dame side, on the other side of coaches looking at it, Holman Wiggins and Notre Dame, there was legitimate interest there. I don't believe it ever got to a formal interview. It sounds like Alabama's already working on giving him some things that I don't think Notre Dame could give him in regards to responsibility and things along those lines. And then it became about Jamarcus Shepard from Purdue. We talked about it 2 days ago, like this is where we're going. Nothing's finalized yet, which is why on the message board we push back, like people saying this is a done deal. It's not a done deal. If things go the way we think they're going to go on Tuesday, then we do think it's going to be a done deal. So Tuesday comes and goes. I heard everything went great with Jamarcus Shepard, but a new name popped in. Well, when I was told they're going to have another interview on Wednesday, I honestly, to be honest with you, assumed it was going to be Holman Wiggins.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then Wednesday morning comes around and it's Chansi Stuckey. Like Chansi Stuckey, like who the heck is Chansi Stuckey? Yeah, exactly. Like I know who he is, right? He played at Clemson and all that kind of stuff, and we'll talk about it. But like he was not someone on the radar. What I have been told since then is that he actually kind of came in. He's someone who played for John McNulty in the NFL. John McNulty was the Cardinals wide receivers coach in 2011. Chansi Stuckey was a player of his. Chansi Stuckey was a 5-year player at Clemson. To kind of show how old we're getting, Vince, I think he's the 4th guy on the current staff that had a rivals profile. Tommy Rees obviously had one. Marcus Freeman had one. Mike Mickens had one. And now Chansi Stuckey had one.
Wow.
There is no profile for Harry Heastan.
No.
Sorry.
I don't think the internet back then.
So you hear about Chansi Stuckey, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And so I started kind of reaching out to sources, and people didn't really kind of know where it was going, and pretty quickly his name kind of came into like the forefront of this is what it's looking like it's going to be. And so started getting word last night that this is the direction they're going to go. So I started making some phone calls, got a hold of some very good sources on the Notre Dame side of things. And essentially what it was is coming into this week, the intel that I had was correct. So I said, look, was I getting bad intel? Like what? No, that's where they were looking coming into the week. It was just kind of assumed it was more of a formality with Jamarcus Shepard. Nothing bad happened with Jamarcus Shepard, although the one thing I was told is that Jamarcus Shepard comes from a very strong passing background. He has some ideas on how things are going to go. And Tommy Rees was more looking for someone that was going to just go coach receivers.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I don't like. That's something I was told by a source last night. We'll see. Ultimately, that's not the reason why Chansi Stuckey is going to be hired. I was told he flat out blew the interview away. Yeah. That the concern that they had coming in was the fact that he's been a coach for 1 year. Now, he played in the NFL for 5 years, was out of the game for a few years, and then spent 2 years at Clemson. He had like off the field roles like video GA, offensive player development.
Right.
He was on the field though. I mean, like during games, like I've seen pictures of him on the field with games, headset on in one of them.
Right. There was one,
but he wasn't like he wasn't like a hands-on coach though. Right. So, and the Clemson connection wasn't just because he was an alum. Dabo Swinney was his position coach at Clemson. So he played right before Dabo took over as head coach. He left in Chansi Stuckey's last year was 06. He was Clemson's leading receiver in 05 and 06. And so then he was a 7th round NFL draft pick, but Dabo was his head coach or his position coach. And then, of course, Dabo became the head coach, I believe, a year or two later at Clemson. So he goes to the NFL, plays for 5 years in the NFL, has over 100 career catches, not a ton, and then gets out of coaching, goes back to Clemson for 2 years. Then Dave Aranda, after his first year at Baylor, which did not go well, obviously they went 2-7. Baylor didn't really do well offensively. They were pretty good on defense, but they were not good on offense in his first year. Went 2-7, and so he after 1 year, and props to Dave Aranda for this. After 1 year, completely overhauls his offensive staff. New coordinator, all new assistant coaches almost, and one of those hires was Chansi Stuckey. So this was his first full-time job. Obviously, Baylor goes from 2-7 to 12-2, wins the Big 12 championship, wins the Sugar Bowl, beat Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl, had a jump of 8 points per game in scoring. They went from 23 to 31, had about a 70-yard jump in yards. Had almost a full yard of total offensive jump. Actually, no, I'm sorry. They had a yard and a half. They almost 2 yards. They went from 4.4 yards per play in 2020 to 6.3 in 2021. Passer rating went up. They were ranked 93rd in 2020, jumped up to 38. So, and he was part of that. Had 2 or 3 receivers have all-time career highs. One of his 3 receivers this year was a kid that transferred from Dartmouth. The other kid, R.J. Sneed and Tyquan Thornton, both had career years. R.J. Sneed, by the way, is in the transfer portal now. Just saying, as a graduate.
No, but that's interesting though, because
right.
Obviously, there's a tie there. So.
Right, and Notre Dame is looking for that. So I was told he blew away the interview. They were really impressed with his knowledge as a coach. Like, it's one thing to know the game because you played it, but he has a plan on how to coach. Did some digging on the Baylor side of things. Sounds like he was a big hit in his 1 year there. I mean, he was only there 1 full year. I mean, he was hired like a week after Marcus Freeman was hired at Notre Dame.
Right.
So they were impressed by it. And right now, his focus, he just wants to coach the receivers. That's where he is in his development, which I think they also liked. And that's the one thing of debate. But I talked to a source last night that was really connected to this whole thing. And he said, look, we didn't necessarily go in thinking Chansi was going to be the guy. Sure. Chansi kind of won us all over.
So you think obviously, it was a courtesy interview from John?
I don't think it was a courtesy interview as much. I mean, I think that's the only reason he probably got in the door.
Okay.
Is because of that connection. I don't think a guy with 1 year coaching experience. And the thing that was said to me was, hey, look, he has as much coaching experience as Brian Hartline had when Ohio State hired him, the offensive court, to their receivers coach.
Right.
And you've got to look at that NFL background as part of the evolution of him learning the game and things like that. And that was part of it. Recruiting wise, they say he's got a tremendous personality, tons of passion, tons of energy, really strong man of faith, which I think at Notre Dame is something that impacted some people at Notre Dame. Like, he's very outward with his faith, which doesn't super surprise you when you consider who he played for in college. Dabo's kind of that way, which obviously for someone like me, I'm all for that. But not like an in your face kind of way, but he's just, hey, this is who I am.
Sure.
Players loved him. I went and looked
genuine.
on Twitter last night. I found like tweets from parents of him during the season talking about how we love Coach Stuckey. He does such a great job taking care of our son and things like that. And you don't find that a whole lot, with parents just being vocal like that when the guy's so early. So that's the background on him. Now that's not our analysis. That's us giving you just, here's the 411. I have 2 trains of thought on this. Number one is part of this I don't like, right? I don't like that you didn't necessarily want a dynamic personality, because this is what Tommy Rees wanted, and Marcus Freeman is kind of going along with it, because that's what Marcus Freeman wanted when he was the D coordinator. Trust me to hire the guys that I think are going to be best for me, and he's given them that leeway, although I was told that Chansi Stuckey really blew Marcus Freeman away too. He loves his energy, loves his passion for kids, that he likes to teach, like it's about teaching the game, very, very detail oriented, I was told, which that's something that I was happy to hear that, because that's always my concern with young guys getting into the business that were former professionals.
With this group, I feel like the details are very, very important, like the detail oriented. It's important for this group, because that was not important.
Right. So obviously I would have liked to have seen Jamarcus Shepard. I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh no, I'm good with that." With it, that's who they should have hired, in my opinion. Okay, I'm a pro Jamarcus Shepard guy.
Sure.
I know what Jamarcus Shepard can do.
Yes,
we've seen him do it.
He's a
I think it would have been.
commodity.
He would have been he would have been a grand slam home run hire.
Yes.
What I'm about to say next, the good and the bad, doesn't dismiss that. But it's like recruiting. You got to evaluate who you could have had, and then you evaluate who you got. Okay? This is the choice they made. Here's my honest opinion of it.
Can I interject one thing?
Sure.
And you wrote it on the message board that I want to clear up the fact that Coach Shepard did not turn down Notre Dame. Notre Dame went in a different direction.
Correct. Now,
and I think that's important
I
to
think
understand.
once it became obvious that Notre Dame wasn't going to offer Coach Shepard,
sure,
that he then, because Washington was pushing him to make a decision.
Yes.
And so I think I don't think it ever got to the point where they told him no, but it was clear that he
was proactive about the fact that he was, I mean, it was
right.
Right. So I just wanted to put that out there because, because people think that maybe, it went a different way. But
this wasn't a thing where Notre Dame wasn't willing to pay him enough money. This wasn't a thing where, I think that maybe the fit wasn't there because of what the involvement he wants, where Tommy Rees just wants a guy to go coach the receivers. I do think there was a little bit of a, maybe that wasn't going to work, but it wasn't a situation where they offered him the job and he said no.
Right. I'm going
I
to
think
Washington.
there were some people at Notre Dame that were like me, that Jamarcus Shepard was who they wanted, but ultimately at the end of the day, this is who Tommy Rees wanted. And Coach Freeman's going to support that, which is what he wanted when he was the D coordinator. And then Chansi Stuckey showed Marcus Freeman enough to say, hey, look, I like this guy.
Yeah.
I asked about his recruiting, and they're like, look, he doesn't have a lot of experience recruiting, but as I've said for a long time, recruiting is about personality and work ethic. If you have the personality and you have a work ethic, you've got a good chance to be a good recruiter. Right. I think his NFL background is going to help with that. Coached and played at Clemson and all that kind of stuff. But they were looking for a guy that could coach.
Good recruiter too. I mean,
correct.
You can learn
his last two bosses. I mean,
right. You can learn to be a good recruiter as long as you're willing to put in the time and the effort.
Because it's about the organization and planning things out and how to stay on top of your board. And there's things you got to learn. But
absolutely,
if you got the personality and you're willing to work, so I'm concerned about his lack of experience. I mean, I'm not. This isn't the show to just blindly trust the coaches, right? I mean, this isn't the place for that. But at the same time, I am willing to say, okay, let's see what he can do, because I've heard enough of the things that I need to hear from someone, because what has my mantra always been, Vince? We got to be consistent. Just because I wanted Jamarcus Shepard doesn't mean I change what I say. Bam, that's it right there. If you got the chops, you got the chops.
Right, exactly.
Right? I mean, I'll give an example. And I know some people don't like me to talk about my history, but I don't care. It's my show. I like to talk about it, and it's relevant in this situation.
It is.
So my first year as a full-time coach was 2002 at Muhlenberg College. I fully intended to go back to Muhlenberg in 2003. I got a phone call from Duquesne University that summer. It was like in June. And they wanted me to come in for an interview. Well, I found out after the fact that the only reason they called me to come in for an interview is because the HR department demanded they had to interview X number of people. They already had two guys in mind that they wanted to hire for the job. I came in, interviewed for the job, and just knocked their socks off, just crushed the interview. They called and offered me the job the next morning. I stayed in a hotel in Pittsburgh, and I was going to drive back to Allentown that next morning. And before I left Pittsburgh, they had called and offered me the job. And that was not the intention of doing that. Well, I think it worked out well for Duquesne. We won a national championship that next year. We were a pass-heavy offense. We threw for like over, I think, 340 yards. And our receivers are what dominated our offense. 3 of our 4 receivers were all state. We had an All-American receiver. 2 of my receivers went and got invitations into NFL training camps, things like that. Like, I think it paid off pretty well for Duquesne, right? Because they took a chance on a guy that had 1 year of coaching experience, right? Coaching running backs and even coach receivers.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
And they took a chance on me because I showed them like my knowledge, my passion, my fire was there. So it would be super freaking hypocritical of me to then say, yeah, but I'm going to hold Chansi Stuckey to a different standard than I did. Because here's the thing is I was like 23, 24. Chansi Stuckey's 38 because he
Yeah.
played in the NFL for 5 years
Right.
and has done some other
And took some
things.
time
So
off, and then
right.
exactly.
So I'm going to give him a chance, even though I'm going to sit there and say, like, I wanted Jamarcus Shepard. If it was up to me, that's the direction I'm going. And if that means you got to give him a bigger voice in that room, he earned that bigger voice. You know what I'm saying? By what he's produced, and you should be more open to that as an offensive coordinator, as an offensive staff. That's not the direction they went, and they're taking a risk. They're taking a risk on a guy that's got 1 year coaching experience. But they're taking the risk based on, from what I'm told, and the people that I talked to, are I had one source that I really trust on this one, and it was, look, this guy just crushed the interview. And crushing an interview isn't about force of personality. It's about passion. It's about knowledge. It's about putting it in. And this is like, so this is what how mine was. And I guarantee this is what it was. They get you on the board, right? And it's a little different now because, they got video and they can talk about different things, but they get me on the board and they say, okay, here's what we do. How do you teach this? Okay, well, what if they do this? What if they do that? What if they bring this? What would your adjustments be if they're doing that? And they're peppering you to see how quickly you respond, how sound your arguments are. I remember one time I got in an argument with an offensive coordinator for a job I was interviewing for. And by the end of the conversation, I was like, yeah, I'm not taking this job, because he was trying to tell me that in cover 2, they play inside leverage and they're just going to let you free release outside. Yeah, exactly. I said, no. I said, well, maybe they do that in your league, but in my league, I've never seen that before. But the point is, they pepper you. They're going to sometimes they'll even say things that they know are wrong. I thought that's what was happening in that one interview, but after a while I realized this guy actually believes this nonsense that he's talking. But they'll say things maybe that aren't necessarily accurate, and then you've got to figure it out and correct it. And there's all types of those situations where they put you through the mental test to see where your mind is for the position. Talk about what's your plan. Here's what we do. How would you teach this? Here's some film of our guys. What are some things you notice that you think need to get improved upon, right? And I got some really interesting stuff to say about that from what I was told about what all the guys that interviewed for this job said about the current group of receivers. Man, it's some really talented guys, but they don't really know how to play. just saying. But his plan was really strong, and his ability to teach and to relay how and what he teaches was really strong. And then Dave Aranda and Dabo Swinney, I'm told, made pushes for Chansi Stuckey, because Dave Aranda knew that this is a job that Chansi wanted, and then he did the right thing and helped them push for it. So will it pay off? I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and be like, trust the coaches. We don't do that here, right? We're going to give you our honest assessment of it. But I heard enough good things I heard enough of the trigger words for me.
Yeah.
In my conversations with people around the program that made me say, okay, yep, okay, needed to hear that. Okay, needed to hear that. Yep, okay, there you go. So I heard everything I needed to hear, but there's still some risk involved, right? Because there's one big box not checked, which is experience.
Right.
Here's the other interesting thing. Every single offensive coach at Notre Dame, once this is official, will have coached in the NFL. Tommy Rees coached in the NFL for a year. John McNulty coached in the NFL. Harry Hiestand coached in the NFL. Lance Taylor coached in the NFL. And now Chansi Stuckey played in the NFL. So either coached or played in the NFL. Has a significant NFL background in some capacity, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. But that also goes toward the direction that we feel Tommy Rees wants to go. I mean, he's a pro style NFL type coordinator at the moment, right? I mean, that's all indications are, because that's kind of how he came through, right? So, I mean, and
he was a 7th round draft pick. He's like 5'10". He was like a 7th round draft pick. He came to Clemson as a quarterback. He's not like Michael Floyd. He's not Will Fuller. He wasn't that as a prospect. He had to get by on just being a smart football player. And those are the guys that I kind of like, to be honest with you, as coaches. I think sometimes the guys that maybe weren't incredibly physically gifted. Now, he was supposedly pretty fast. I read some I read some articles from the Clemson rival site from back when he signed with Clemson, which is just crazy.
Yeah, no kidding.
But he was a 3.5 GPA kid coming out of high school. He's from Georgia, from Warner Robins, Georgia. Was a 3.5 GPA kid, had offers from Florida State and Auburn, but he was a 4-star recruit, but not like a top 250 kid. Wasn't like a superior athlete. Was a 7th round draft pick. So not a high draft pick. He's a guy that had to know how to play the game.
Exactly.
And
that's
we
how
had
you
a
stick
couple
around.
right,
That's how you stick around, right?
And he was in for 5 years. Played for like 3 teams in 5 years. And then now he's in coaching. So there's some risk involved. There's no one can look at look, if we're being objective, and that's what we do here, right? We're not going to be unnecessarily critical. We're not going to, right? We don't do that here. If we're going to be objective, you have to be able to look at this and say, they're taking a risk. They're taking a risk on a guy that's been a coach for a year and hoping on the word of others that he's going to be able to develop quickly. Because the thing is, there's no grace period for him. He's not going to be given the expectation he's going to come in and get this group ready right now. And that was another thing I was told is they felt he fit with the current room really well. Like he has the elixir that they need to get healthy, right? From a technical standpoint. And I think maybe that is partly why also, again, if I'm going to look at this objectively, I think that may also be partly why they wanted a guy that just wanted to focus on just coaching receivers as opposed to being sort of a co-OC, because they want a guy that's going to be like, look, man, we know that this room needs some work, and that's going to take all your attention right now is getting these kids how to play the game.
Absolutely.
Because the foundation they're starting with is almost, from scratch.
When you bring it up like that, when you bring up those points, if you're giving me the option, I want somebody who's not going to have split focus. Like, I don't need you to be the passing game coordinator. I need you to focus on getting these guys right, because if these guys get right, we're going to be real dangerous.
Right.
And I don't want split focus, especially from with Stuckey. He obviously has 1 year of experience.
I'm still taking Jamarcus Shepard. I'm just saying I understand that. I understand. If that's the reason for it. Because again, I'm playing a little bit of a devil's advocate here, because you hear things from one side of it, and then you got to be honest and okay, well, that's that side of the conversation. But what about the other side of the conversation? And to me, I think that is something that I think there's merit to that response, saying like, look, this guy's going to come in and focus on teaching these kids how to play the game.
Right.
And I think that's important.
Yes. Oh, I completely agree.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, like, Notre Dame wasn't offering a coordinator, like a pass game coordinator position, from what I understand. Maybe he was asking for it. But
no, it wasn't that. It wasn't that. It wasn't that kind of thing.
No. I'm not saying that that's why it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm just saying if they were looking for a pass game coordinator, I don't think that's the way to go, because I want them to focus on wide receiver. I'm not saying
they weren't looking
was
for that.
All part of the conversation.
They weren't looking for it,
right.
and he didn't ask for it. He understood. Right. Everybody understood. What they were looking for. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And we've got a couple super chats related to this too. So again,
cool.
There's a lot we don't know. Right. There's a lot of wait and see. All I'm going to say to you is, I would have rather seen, personally, if it was up to me, I'm hiring Jamarcus Shepard. That's just me. At the same time, I heard enough things from people close to this situation that they checked all the boxes that for me, because I'll be honest, I flat out texted somebody last night, look, man, make this make sense to me, because I'm having a hard time.
I don't see it. Yeah.
Seeing this one. Right.
Yeah.
This was like as soon as it was like kind of out there and I reached out some sources and they're like, yeah, this is the direction we're going. It was like, okay, make it make sense.
Yeah.
Got a call and it was immediately just like, hey, look, here's how it went down. Here's what's going on. It's okay. And there was like some things I'm listening for. Okay. What I want to hear these things and hit every single one. So it's one of those things where for me, I'm like, okay, you said the things that I needed to hear for me to be willing to give this a chance, to see if this thing can work. And there's risk involved, but if they're right on this, because again, don't think it didn't go unnoticed on the staff that the current considered best receivers coach in college football is the guy that was an NFL wide receiver that had 1 year as a GA at Ohio State before being hired as the receivers coach, and basically immediately became the best receivers coach in the country.
Yeah.
And say, well, he inherited a room with a lot of talent. He did, but so is Chansi Stuckey.
Agreed.
I mean, he's inheriting a talented room. Now it's about go teach these kids how to play the game of football. So I'm willing to give it a chance. I want to see it. I'm going to be open-minded to it. I'm going to say I got some concerns, but there's enough that I've seen and heard that makes me think that this isn't just some afraid to, here's what it was. It wasn't about money. Notre Dame, from what I'm told, has been throwing out big offers to coaches they want. It's not about that. It wasn't about so-and-so wanted co-coordinator job and they weren't willing to give it. That's not what this was about. From what I'm told, for the most part, this was about they just fell in love with Chansi Stuckey. And, that's got to tell me something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because they weren't necessarily looking to – I mean, obviously John McNulty probably wants this. People say, do you think John McNulty was biased? And I'm like, well, maybe. But at the same time, John McNulty knows how important this hire is, and John McNulty wants to be part of a winning program.
Absolutely.
He's not going to go push for one of his former players just because he likes the guy if he didn't think the guy could get the job done. Now, is he right or wrong? We're going to find out.
Yeah, right.
But
Absolutely.
they genuinely believe this is the next Brian Hartline. Now, I'm not a huge fan of chasing the next so-and-so, but, look, a guy that played in the NFL for 5 years, wasn't the most talented guy or the biggest guy, and a guy that has been a part of, two programs that I have a lot of respect for in Baylor and Clemson. Now, questions that people are going to ask about how did the Baylor receivers perform? That will be for a future show because there's a lot of film I want to watch first. I don't want to start talking about what I did or didn't see yet. The only thing I noticed from watching Baylor this year is they do a really good job on contested throws. That's the only thing I'm comfortable talking about right now in regards to how they played the game, because I got to dive into the film first. I don't want to give an opinion that's based on not a lot of film evidence. And I'm also tomorrow supposed to be getting some all 22 film of Baylor. So I want to wait to see that. But I don't want to give an opinion now based on limited film and then change it later, because usually the first thing you say is what people remember. So, again, part of being open-minded is I'm going to watch the film first. I'm going to really dive into some film. I'm going to watch some film today to kind of see how they handle the line of scrimmage. It's kind of an important thing for what we talk about. That TV copy will give me a sense of that, how they handle getting off the line, how much diversity there is and how they line up and stance and starts. Like, you can see some of that from TV copy. But I need to see the all 22 to really start getting into how they run routes. Do they stack? Do they stem? What their top end's like. How do they handle high coverage, under coverage? How do they handle drops? How do they handle zone? All those type of things. I'm supposed to be getting some all 22 tomorrow. And when I get that, I'll be able to really dive into that. So we will take a deeper dive into Chansi Stuckey down the road. But I'm going to watch the film first. I mean, that's just how I am. But it's a risky hire, but it's one that I'm willing to let's see how it goes, because I heard some really good things that I needed to hear to feel better about this move. I'm gonna be honest. When I first heard it, I was like, "You got to be freaking kidding me!" Like, that was my reaction. You got to be freaking kidding me.
It was all but done,
right?
With Shepard, who
I'm thinking, man, you get Harry Heastand and Jamarcus Shepard on a coaching staff with Lance Taylor and John McNulty and Tommy Reese. Like, oh my gosh, like, I'm fired up about this, man. Like, this is going to be a great staff. And then I'm going to Chansi Stuckey, who I only know of Chansi Stuckey as a player at Clemson.
Right.
I'm like, wait, he's a coach? That was my first response. I'm not going to lie to you. Then as I do the digging, you start to say, okay, I'm hearing enough that says, let's give this guy a shot, because there's some things that I'm hearing that as a former receivers coach, it's like, okay, yep. Okay, check. Yep. Need that. All right, cool. And, and then I asked about recruiting. They're like, look, he's been a recruit. He hasn't even finished one full recruiting cycle yet. Right. But here's what we know: energy, passion. Kids love him. Kids connect to him. They gravitate to him. Those are all things that make us think that he can be a good recruiter. But at the end of the day, it's going to be about the product he puts on the field. And that's what we were told. Now, there's a couple super chats, Vince.
From David Carpenter.
We'll get to, yeah.
Yes, very much. Thank you, David. Thank you for all the intel. It's not what I was expecting, but for now, I trust Freeman and Tommy. any indications about his recruiting chops?
Yeah, we just kind of talked about that, David. He's been a recruiter for a year, not even a full class.
Right.
I mean, they've got to an early signing period. I was told that he's got the highest ranked player in the 247 class, but I mean, that doesn't tell me a whole lot. It's too early to know.
The highest ranked Baylor player in the class. Okay.
It doesn't tell me a whole lot. Right. I mean, Del Alexander brought in the highest ranked offensive player for Notre Dame on my board. It doesn't make he's a good recruiter, right?
Yeah, right.
That's a wait and see. But I've always said recruiting is about work ethic and personality.
Exactly.
If you have those and you're engaging and you're personable, like what experience did Brian Hartline have when he became a recruiter at Ohio State?
Sure.
You know, he knows the game. He's personable. He puts in the work, and he's adapted to the plans necessary to stay on top of your board. Those are going to be the keys.
Yeah, there was a video that one of the posters put on the board. It was on Twitter, and it was basically him running through a drill that he does at Baylor. And, you know, he's kind of walking everybody through it and whatever. But you can tell he's personable because not every coach is comfortable with a camera in their face, you know, talking it through and being personable and all that. I mean, just from that little snippet, you can tell he's got a really good personality. You know what I mean?
Right.
Again,
well, I heard passionate and engaging is what I kept hearing.
Yeah.
Like I had one guy tell me, like sitting there listening to him after 20 minutes, I wanted to go grab a helmet, put a helmet on, and start playing football for him.
So it's similar to the way we think when we hear Marcus Freeman talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what we were all saying a year ago.
And something I had heard about Jamarcus Shepard. It's one of the things I loved about Jamarcus Shepard.
Absolutely.
The difference is Jamarcus Shepard, I know what he can do. He did it at Western Kentucky. He did it at Washington State. He did it at Purdue.
Yeah.
Chansi Stuckey hasn't proven it yet. That doesn't mean he can't do the job just as well. We got to find out. They're taking a risk. Yeah. They're taking a risk, and this is going to fall on Tommy Rees if it doesn't work out. At the same time, it'll fall positively on Tommy Rees if it does work out.
For sure.
And those are the things we have to learn and see. You know.
Jacob Watson, thank you very much, Jacob. Is there something they think Stuckey has that will get them the best players and develop them? Also, you think we'll try to get another transfer?
So, yeah, I do think that the things that we kind of talked about during the show, it's about they think he can really teach. They think he has a plan. They think he's engaging. The way he communicates, they say it's really easy to digest the things he says, but he can really teach complex things. I actually did a little bit of studying on Baylor's offense even before today, not so much from a receiver standpoint, but it's a pro-style spread offense. Jeff Grimes is their offensive coordinator. He was an O-line coach. You know, they like to run the football. They only passed for like 40 yards in the Sugar Bowl because they just ran all over Ole Miss. But it's going to be a similar style. There's a lot of complexity to what they do pass game wise. So having a coach that can make it easy to learn is gonna be important. You know, you've got to find a coach that can teach guys how to learn those complex things. And I'm told that he did a good job with that at Baylor and showed he can do a good job with that there. That's what they think. They think he can teach it. They think he's energetic. They think the players are going to play hard for him. The players are going to trust him. Very outgoing personality, which is an opposite of what was there before. This isn't a knock on Coach Alexander. It's just Coach Alexander's a more quiet guy, a more keep your head down and do your job kind of guy. Coach Stuckey is more of an energetic. I mean, you've been at practices. How often have you ever heard Del Alexander's voice in practice?
Never.
You don't.
I didn't.
You hear other people.
Sure.
Coach Stuckey's the guy you're going to hear, and I think those are things that, yeah. I never said this. So if you want to read that question,
sure. Alex B says, Brian on the board, you said you agreed this was stacking maybes on top of maybes. Can you please explain?
I never said that. I never said that. Somebody on the board said that. What they're basically saying is, and I'll try to explain it. I just want to make sure that we're clear. That wasn't me that said that. What they're basically saying is, you know, look, when you look at Marcus Freeman, talented, but 35 and a first-year head coach, we think he's going to be good, but we don't know. Tommy Rees, 29-year-old offensive coordinator. We think he's going to be good, but we don't know. Maybe he's going to be good, maybe not. There's still a lot to learn. I think that's where they're coming from, is that right there. So, but anybody saying that there's somebody else saying that I said that, I didn't say that. I've never used that expression in my life, stacking maybes on top of maybes.
I've never heard
so that. Never used that expression. So I don't know where that came from, but that's what they're referring to. It doesn't mean that none of them, any of them are good. The point behind it is, if there's a lot of ifs, it's kind of like taking a roster full of 3-star recruits. Maybe they all pan out and they're all Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoahs. But when all you have is 3-star kids, the reality is the hit rate is going to tend to be a little lower.
Exactly.
And I think that's the concern with, you've got a first-year head coach, you've got a young 29-year-old coordinator, you've got a 38-year-old receivers coach who's never really coached the position before. This could work out really well, but could also fall flat on its face. I think that's kind of,
that's the chance they're taking. Yeah. I completely agree with you. He checks a lot of boxes, but you're still taking a massive chance.
Right. And that's fair. That's a very fair criticism. I mean, Notre Dame is putting a lot of, like, people say, this is a really young, energetic coaching staff. Yeah, it is. But
that could be good, and it could not be good.
Right.
I mean,
it's all going to boil down to, is Marcus Freeman as good as we think he is?
Correct.
And if he is, then a lot of those things kind of fall into place, and it's going to work out. And
I think the same could be said about Tommy Rees. At this point.
And I could argue just as vehemently that, hey, look, I like the fact that they were open to the best candidate, not the best on paper resume.
Sure.
I mean, you can because look, I'll be honest, I've been there where I'm like, man, I hope that they actually look at what I do and how good I am, not that some guy has 10 more years of experience. So, I mean, again, I have questions about it, but I think and I've never met Chansi Stuckey, so I can't tell you what kind of talent he has but I'm just telling you, people that I talked to were blown away. I mean, blown away is an expression I heard multiple times yesterday. Blown away by him.
Okay.
I don't think they went into that saying, "Yep, by the end of the day, he is going to be the guy." By the end of the day, he interviews.
They changed their minds. I mean, he changed their minds in an interview. Basically, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
David Carpenter with a super chat. Thank you, David. In both of your opinions, is it fair to say that most important thing right now is for our existing wide receivers to improve to increase recruiting? I think it's important. It's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's definitely part of it, because recruits generally will look at a team and they'll think to themselves, okay, what it would be like if I was in that spot, and what is that going to be? It's much more difficult for a player to visualize themselves at a school that is not what they're running right there, and the coach is like, well, this is what we're going to do. If you come, this is what we're going to do. That's so much hard. It's so much easier for a coach to get you in the film room and be like, you see that guy right there? See number 4? That's going to be your spot.
I'll give you a great example. Great example of exactly what you're saying, Vince. I remember talking to Alizé Mack, and when he was coming out, he was Alizé Jones at the time. And I remember talking to him because, remember, he was committed to UCLA.
I do, yeah.
Flipped to Notre Dame. And one of the stories Alizé told was, when I went to UCLA, they got on the board and they drew up all the different ways they thought they were going to use me. And it all sounded good. He said, when I went to Notre Dame, they popped on film and showed me how they were going to use me.
Mm-hmm.
That matters to kids.
Yep.
Right? Like, because kids, especially nowadays, kids are a little bit more savvy. They know, like, okay, yeah, you tell me that, but I'm an internet click away from looking at you, seeing that you had the 85th most passing yards in the country last year.
Right.
With all due respect, why would I come play for you because you say you're going to do something when I can go over here to Ohio State or Alabama and I know they're going to throw the ball because they do it. And so you have to. I think the bowl game helped in that regard. And look, we threw for 500 yards. We threw 68 passes and 5 touchdowns. We're going to throw the ball. It's the only game that I have. Tommy Rees can point to if you really look at Notre Dame's last 3 games of the season in 2021. Tommy Rees is going to have some evidence, on-field evidence, to show people like, hey, look, this is really who we are. I mean, they passed for 302, 341, and 509 yards and threw 9 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. But then they watch the receiver film and are like, these guys don't know how to play. And now they've got to go out and show that we can teach you how to play the game. We can develop you and we can get you to the next level. That's where a guy like Chansi Stuckey, that's the one part of his resume that helps. Hey, man, I was 5'10" and a 7th-round draft pick, and I was in the league for 5 years. I played with Larry Fitzgerald. You know, I was a teammate of Larry Fitzgerald. I know what it takes to get to that level, right? I know what it takes, and I can get you there. Yeah. And now he's got to go prove it. But that playing in the NFL thing is going to carry some weight early that then at some point soon needs to be backed up by, okay, show me now. What are you going to produce for me now? And I think those are going to be the keys. But when kids see, played in the NFL or, coached in the NFL, that matters. And the fact that Notre Dame's coaching staff can say all of our coaches either played or coached in the NFL is going to be huge.
Yeah.
You know, John McNulty not only coached Chansi Stuckey, he coached a future Hall of Famer. He coached Larry Fitzgerald as a receivers coach. You know, those things all kind of matter a little bit. And if he can then, to David's point, start showing with film back to your point too, Vince, once, you know, after 2022, he can then pop into film and be like, look how much Braden Lindsey improved from this time to this time. Look at how Braden Lindsey was killing people at the line of scrimmage in 2022. When he couldn't get off the press, he just ran around people before. Look at how good Deion Colsey was after catching 4 passes as a freshman, right? Once you can show that, then it matters. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I know of some 2022 and 2023 commits, or recruits, not commits, that are looking for a reason to go to Notre Dame. And Notre Dame didn't give them one in 2022. And there's some kids that I know for a fact, some big-time receivers, and Carnell Tate, I think, is one, but he's not it. There's some big-time receivers that really like Notre Dame and really like Marcus Freeman and really like Tommy Rees, but they need to be convinced because of the number of passes and the coaching. If they can be convinced that Chansi Stuckey is that guy, then I think you're going to see his first recruiting class be a major success.
Okay, I need to, before we transition to defensive coordinator, because we are running out of time, I need to address something that's in the chat. ZLB thinks I'm wearing Michigan colors.
I knew where you were going with this.
I'm sorry. I can't sit there and take this kind of abuse. This is abuse. This is my team. This is Riley. This is where I'm a baseball coach. It was a pep rally. And I know you're all going to be shocked, but they always make me do the PA, like the announcing. I'm the hype guy. And so I had to, put the colors on. And we are not Michigan colors. Although, as much as it pains me to say it, I did look at Michigan's uniforms for some inspiration when we were getting some new uniforms because they're the same colors as my school. But this is not Michigan. This is Riley. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah.
Let's transition to the other open position that needs to be filled, and it's on the defensive side, defensive coordinator. Brian, what are you hearing up to this point? Where is Notre Dame with this whole thing?
Well, so what I was told last night is that there was a report out that John Haycock, the defensive coordinator, I'm sorry, Vince.
I saw.
Did you see that?
From Jacob?
No, from Eric Fasano, who you put in timeout earlier.
Oh.
That was really good. Really good. Really good comeback, Eric. I liked it a lot. Eric said should put Vince in timeout for the Mays. Well done, Eric.
That's
very fair.
That's fair.
Very fair. Okay, so I'm glad to see you've calmed down as well over there in the chat a little bit. So there was a report last night that John Haycock and Notre Dame are working on a contract to be the next D coordinator at Notre Dame. That was from Football Scoop, I believe. According to the conversation I had last night, they're not there yet.
Okay.
There's still some other things that they've got to work through before he even agrees to want to come, but that is the direction that they're pushing right now. But it's not quite to the point yet where he is accepted, pending them working out some stuff. Now, by the end of today, could it be that way? Sure. But I don't think they're quite there yet. But at least we now know, based on the conversations that I've had and the information I gathered, that I do feel confident in saying that John Haycock from Iowa State right now is the focal point of, okay, let's see if this works. And if it doesn't, then they've got a couple other guys in mind that they like a lot as well. So John Haycock is the defensive coordinator at Iowa State.
Right.
He has been the defensive coordinator at Iowa State since Matt Campbell was there. He was also Matt Campbell's defensive coordinator for the last couple of years at Toledo. He was also Jim Tressel's replacement at Youngstown State.
Oh, okay.
And so he's been a head coach at the FCS level for almost 10 years. So he's 61. He brings some experience. And so I think that's a little bit of a counter to some of the youth that we've discussed so much on the Notre Dame coaching staff. You've got a guy like John McNulty. You've got a guy like Harry Easton. If they're able to get it done with Coach Haycock, you now have 3 veteran coaches that you can kind of build your staff around. And so, I know a little about John Haycock coming into this. I had a friend of mine who really likes him, who challenged me, like, you got to really study him. And, I've looked into him a lot. One of the concerns I had about John Haycock is that he is a pure 3-3-5 guy at Iowa State the last few years. However, as I did more digging into him, he came to the 3-3-5 in a very similar fashion and around the same time that Marcus Freeman did, and that was that 2017-2018 season. He had always been a 4-down guy up until then. So he evolved into a 4-down in the Big 12, which means – or he evolved into a 3-down in the Big 12, which means it'll be easier for him to adjust to the talent he has, because right now Notre Dame has 4-down talent.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
And the schedule's different. They went to that because the Big 12 is filled with air raid teams that can also run the ball, right? That's kind of why he went to that. And so, again, like we just had someone say, I don't love the 3-3-5, though. I get that. But that's where a lot of teams are going. But it's not. John Haycock hasn't been a 3-3-5 guy his whole life, like Gary Patterson has been a 4-2-5 guy. And matter of fact, there was a video on the board today that claimed, and I went back and looked at some film, and you can see the shift. But like in the middle of the 2017 season, they just were like, screw this 4-down stuff. We're getting killed. Let's switch. And eventually, they evolved to where, the last couple of years, they've been one of the 2 or 3 best defenses in the Big 12. And, this year, I think they were the only defense that this year that was better than them was Oklahoma State, who we've talked about. And then because Notre Dame hung so much on Iowa State or on Oklahoma State, that they were only 0.2 points behind. They held opponents this year to 18.3 points per game. And Oklahoma State was at 18.1 points per game. They gave up 20 points in the bowl game. I'm sorry, Iowa State was third. That was Baylor that was second. Iowa State was third at 20.5 points per game. They held Clemson to 20 points in the bowl game against Clemson. They lost to Clemson 20-13. They held Clemson to 315 yards of total offense and 4.3 yards per play. Did a pretty good job in that. Total defense, Iowa State was second in total defense behind Oklahoma State. They were only 309.6 yards per game. That's pretty good. And then 5.04 yards per play was also second in the Big 12 this year in defense. And I'll be honest with you, Iowa State's not a team loaded with really talented players, if we're going to be honest.
No, that's true. I mean,
they were also number 2 in yards per game last year.
When you think of Iowa State, you think of their offense and what they can do offensively.
Right.
I mean,
so in 5 years at Iowa State, they finished second in the Big 12 in total defense 3 times. So that's pretty good. It's pretty good. So, I mean, so you look at that and you say, okay, he's put pretty good defense on the field.
Sure.
And hasn't really had a lot of NFL players, if we're being honest. I mean, they're just, if anyone watches them play, like Mike Rose isn't the athlete that half the Notre Dame kids are, and he's their best linebacker. And so I think those are things that you look at and say, okay, that's something that clearly they see and something they're looking for. So that's where we are right now. We'll dive more into that, Vince, as we get more into
because there's also other pieces to look at, because he's been a secondary coach in his career as well. And so what does that mean for the open linebacker coach? Like, how is that going to shake out, and moving people around? So there's a lot to talk about if that ends up being the case.
And my hope, I mean, I would imagine the hope is that somehow you can have Nick Lazinski stay and work with him coaching linebackers, even
True.
though he won't be a full-time coach, meaning full-time pay, or a GA like that, if they can find somebody like that, which is a little hard to do. And Brian Mason, who we anticipate being the special teams coach, coached the Rovers at Cincinnati. So he's coached a position before.
So that lessens the responsibility of the linebacker
if they decide to go that route.
If that's what they do. Yeah, right. Yeah. So there's obviously options on the table, no question.
Right. So let's get to some more super chats before you get out of here, Vince.
I lost a couple. It did that kind of that weird thing where so there's definitely a couple that I lost. So I just want to let you know that.
Okay.
Jordan,
I'll pull them up.
Thank you, Jordan. Reese chose lost Ian Book over first round Phil Dracovic, and now he's choosing a 9 possible ace over a proven ace. What do you think of these red flags?
The first one still bothers me, but I mean, I don't think those two go hand in hand. I don't think those two to me don't have anything necessarily to do with each other. I think one is about style of play and being a young, inexperienced coach. Tommy Reese isn't the same guy now that he was then, and Brian Kelly's not the head coach anymore. So I don't. It doesn't bother me as much. This one doesn't. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't work out, we'll be critical of it. And we'll say, maybe next time you don't give Tommy Reese carte blanche to do whatever he wants. If it works out, you're going to say, okay, well done, kid, because he listened to somebody he trusts, which is John McNulty, right? Clearly he's,
I get that. I mean, I do. There's people that you're going to listen to, and there's people that you're going to go to for advice. And I'm sure his dad is one of those people. And we know that John McNulty is one of those people.
Right.
And this just gives more evidence that that's the case.
Right. There's another one.
John, thank you very much, John. He says he kind of developed the 3 over the top thing, didn't he, to slow down RPOs and whatnot?
Yes, he did. It's basically they have like a 3 high safety look, and that safety in the middle is kind of like just like a rover kind of guy. He just kind of plays downhill. Cincinnati did some of this last year with their rover at times with Marcus Freeman, but yes, I don't know if he invented it, but he perfected it. But again, it was to combat the type of offense he's going to face in the Big 12. I don't think John Heacock is the kind of guy that's going to be like, well, let's play USC and air raid Lincoln Riley. That's also something else I like. Iowa State's had a lot of success stopping Oklahoma. Right? They've beaten Oklahoma twice.
That's a very interesting take.
In 2020, or no, was it 2020? Was it one of the last couple of years? They played Oklahoma twice, and 2 of those those were 2 of Oklahoma State's 3 lowest scoring games of the season. So
that's an interesting way to look at it. I wonder if that was
I don't think it hurt.
That's what I'm saying. Was that like a nice little addition, or was that something like, hey, USC is going to be a pain in our butt every year, so let's look at people who've been successful against Oklahoma.
Because you're seeing more ACC teams go to this air raid. North Carolina.
That's an interesting way to look.
USC's going to it in a more run-oriented version of it than what they were in the past. So I think it certainly factored into it. Absolutely. And then I think, Vince, we got one more, which Jordan, I guess this is just kind of him sharing his opinion, which I appreciate.
That's great. Jordan, thanks for the super chat. Says he watched Stuckey interview. He doesn't have an engaging personality like Freeman, not in the same league. Freeman grabs you from the get-go. Stuckey, no.
Number one, that's a subjective opinion, right? That's Number two, you're not hiring him to be your head football coach. You're hiring him to coach your wide receivers. So I don't think if you're not Marcus Freeman, you don't have it. Marcus Freeman is a bit of a unicorn. That's why there aren't a lot of 35-year-old head coaches in college football.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I understand where you're coming from. Look, it's he's a guy that, to me, if they're right on him, this is going to be a great hire. If not, this is going to be a disappointment. But here's the thing. I don't see this being a step back from what they had. I think that's something we can all agree on. I have no doubt he's going to be better than what Notre Dame had. No doubt in my mind he's going to be better than what they had. And that's a step in the right direction. Will it be as much of one?
Well, that remains to be seen.
That remains to be seen.
Robert Rhodes, thank you for the super chat. Brian and Vince, thank you for answering my questions about Stuckey and Heacock without having to ask. Brian, feel free to ignore my last email.
I will still respond, Robert. Don't you worry about that. Yeah, you are welcome, and thank you for the super chat. I do appreciate
very
that
much so. Very much so.
Yep. So it's a lot going on. Very interesting stuff. We'll be back tomorrow. We're gonna launch a new format tomorrow. So tomorrow,
okay,
tomorrow
cool.
is Ryan Roberts' first official day at Irish Breakdown. Today's his last day at his current job. Tomorrow's his first official day at Irish Breakdown. So we're gonna launch a new format for the Friday mailbag. Since Vince for the school year can only be on for an hour at a time, and we like the mailbags to go a little longer, we're going to kind of make them one show. So when you're here, you're here. But the way we're going to do it is the first hour of the show is me and Vince talking football, about Notre Dame football, college football. We're going to stick to the team. Then when he leaves, Ryan Roberts is going to join the show for hour 2, and we're going to talk recruiting. You can talk team too, because Ryan, you can ask Vince's opinion on recruits, like talent-wise, sure. And you can ask Ryan about the team. But we're gonna start doing that. That's going to be our new Friday mailbag format. So we're going to go back to a little bit longer shows, 2-hour shows. And part 1's going to be me and Vince talking about the team. Part 2 is going to be me and Ryan and I talking recruiting, Notre Dame recruiting. And obviously early on, it'll be more about sharing our opinions on recruits and the overall situation. And very, very soon, as Ryan gets ramped up, and kind of dives into this thing full head first, it'll be him and Sean talking about the latest in recruiting. But for right now, obviously, it's going to be more about giving our opinion of things and those type of things. So, and Alex Udell says, Brian, my daughter, thank you for the super chat, Alex, and I'm sorry your daughter's not feeling well.
Yeah,
or you're not as well. But my daughter's home on quarantine watching with me and wants y'all to say hi to her. Her name is Bryn.
What's up, Bryn?
How you doing, sweetheart? Thank you for joining the show and watching with your dad.
Yeah.
We love your dad. Your dad's a great guy. And we very, very much are happy that your dad is a part of our Irish Breakdown family. So, Bryn, I hope you enjoyed the show. Yes. I promise you we're getting done soon so you can go have fun and play and relax. But thank you very much for watching the show. And thank all of you for watching the show. Appreciate y'all very, very much. Thanks for being with us. We're going to continue this conversation on the Irish Breakdown message board. So as my man Mace AK says, join the message board. Just do it. $4.99 a month or $49.99 for the year. You won't regret it. No, obviously, we got the merch store down there. We still have the Built Bar promo code. If you use promo code Irish Breakdown, one word, all caps, you get 10% off your entire purchase. If you sign up for the message board and you want to buy some merch, if you sign up for a year, I send you a 20% discount for your entire purchase. If you only sign up monthly, you still get a 10% discount for your entire merch store purchase. So take advantage of that, everybody. And for Vince, I'm Brian. We will talk to you again tomorrow. Thanks for joining us on the Irish Breakdown podcast.